Okay, should be good. Hopefully. Good. Let me check whether we have viewers. No, I'm the only one. Well, anyways, it's going to be recorded. Ah, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Okay. So welcome to this in-person class. Sorry, it takes me like 10 minutes to just connect everything. So yeah, today we so it's chapter 5. But just before, let's just finish this. I've tried twice and it doesn't work if I do it at the end of the lecture. I don't have time. So here are the equations that we want to solve. And then the questions. So I'm going to just hop into some. So the solutions are on the website, but I still want to show it, show to you how it's done. Okay, and then I have to. Oh, we have one viewer. Good. So let's share the screen. Okay. And why that's working. All right. So how many of you tried it, did it? Nobody. Okay, well, nobody did it. So I think you're going to be more stressed out when you get closer to the exam. And in that case, you're going to be more interested in solving exercises. So for this reason, maybe I should just move on and continue the chapter. Yeah, and do some exercises at the end. I thought, so that's what I did last time. And then I thought, oh, maybe I should do them going forward each week. But maybe, yeah, if I don't assign stuff that you really must do, then there's no way you're going to do it. So yeah, I'll stick with what I did last time. So let's forget about this and move on to the material. So, okay, pollution damages, and now I have to share my screen. Oh, and now I'm stuck with this thing. Sorry, can't get rid of it. Okay, so today we really dive into the topics of environmental economics in the sense that, so up to now, we've seen more general versions of economic efficiency, economic application, but now we're going to really apply them to what we've seen previously. So in the first few classes, I've discussed more of a concrete manner into what is damage, what type of problems do we have, what type of solutions do we have. And now we're going to discuss how economists think of these things. So we think of them in very abstract and general ways. So what I'm going to show you is we're going to build up onto a model that's the MACAD, or Marginal Abatement Cost Marginal Damage model, which is a very neat model for two reasons. One, it's super simple, and well, yeah, relatively simple. And two, it's you can really apply it to any problem, and especially you can apply it to any mechanisms that economists would like to see implemented. May it be subsidies, taxes, uh, quotas, permits. All of these are going to all be studied within the same framework. And here is, oops, here it is. Yeah, so here we're going to again have this distinction between positive and normative concept. So the positive statement that we have in our context is just what is the level of emissions, what is the level of pollution, but it doesn't say anything and how do industries work, how do damage occur. But then this doesn't say anything about what we should do about it. And then, of course, what we're going to, the question we're going to answer is what is the socially efficient level of emissions, which is a normative concept. It's saying if we want to achieve the greatest level of efficiency in markets or in societies or in the world, then this is the policy that we should aim for emissions, which are like any other types of economic activity that we may analyze, and we're going to get answers thanks to our framework. So yeah. Oops. I should use my. Okay, so yeah. Yeah, so the model presents simple trade-off situation. Trade-offs, why? Because there are two things that you have to take into account when you deal with emissions or pollutions. One, pollution is bad. So maybe you didn't know already, but pollution is not fun. But also reducing pollution is not fun either. One affects people and firms, but then the other also affects, well, mostly firms, because it can cost a lot to reduce emissions. And as we already have said, so it may not be the case that you would like to reduce all the pollution in the world, because it may cost a lot of money. And some people may not just not like this proposition. Yeah, so pollution damage, what is it? It's a very general concept of why we don't like pollution, and it's a monetary concept in the sense that we're not going to discuss pollution because of pollution we just lost this frog species in Amazonia or something. We're just going to discuss about this from a really human perspective. So why is it that we care about this? And obviously losing one, so losing mosquitoes or losing frogs or losing elephants, well, sadly enough, it doesn't affect people's happiness, or people are the same, or people are not as ready to pay for reducing this all of these sorts of damages. So here the pollution damage is going to simply be a relation or a function of the amount of pollution emitted, so the amount of emissions, and how bad it is for society to have it. So this is the total damage would be the total amount of negative consequences that came from a certain level of emissions. But then we are really going to care about marginal damage. Why? Because as you may have heard before, and it may be a good or a bad thing, in my opinion, it's not exactly true that we always care about marginal decisions, but in terms of economic analysis, most of the models we're going to see and most of the decisions that we're going to analyze are going to be done at the margin, by which I mean that we're going to be able to say perfectly, okay, this is the exact amount of emissions that we think is the best, and to know whether we're at the exact perfect place, then we have to know, well, what would be the extra damage that would be caused by an extra small amount of emissions. And this is what it is. So it's the marginal damage. So the additional damage caused by adding 1 unit of pollution. So yeah, it's of course the first derivative of the total damage function. It's how much the total damage function increase if you increase the emissions by a certain amount. Yeah, and how do we know that it's bad? What we're going to say is, if we were able to ask everybody around, would you be willing to pay some amount to reduce, or will you like to buy some reduction in pollution? And if this was a private market, like any other markets, then people would say, yeah, well, I might buy milk or buy gas at the gas station today, but also my house is surrounded with some pollution, so I may want to clean up a bit. So that's something that you would do by yourself if you were the person that would make this pollution happen. Well, the same thing should apply to any pollution. So it's complicated. Why? Because we live in society, and the people who pollute are not the ones that are affected by pollution. But at the end of the day, this is how we're going to think about it. So the willingness to pay to avoid damages is going to be the indication of the damage that's been caused by pollution. And the marginal willingness to pay is going to be the marginal damage. And we say that marginal damages tend to rise. This doesn't have to be the case, because total damage, of course, rise, because if I emit more, I have more damage, that's for sure. But now, should marginal damages rise? Well, it depends on the situation. In some instances, you could have a case where, so for instance, think about like forest reduction. So if I cut a bit of forest, then I have some bit of damage. And then if I cut some more, then maybe I'm as sad as I was before. But then maybe if the more and more I cut, then the more species I lose, then maybe the additional reduction of the amount of forest is going worse and worse and worse and worse. So that's what we mean by marginal damage. So if we say that the damage caused by emission is always, the extra damage is always constant, then marginal damage is constant. But we usually assume that it's rising for many, many reasons. We're going to discuss more about it. Yeah, so we say that at higher concentrations, damages can increase at ever increasing rates. And the convert of this is that if there is very little damage or very little emission, then maybe the amount of damage is almost undetectable. So think about, I don't know, your house. If there's one sock on the floor somewhere, yeah, it's bad, but it's really not enough maybe to convince you to start cleaning. But if you can't go around the house, then yeah, so that's a big moment that you tell yourself, yeah, I should start cleaning. So it's a bit the same here. So there may be safe levels of emissions below which we say that it doesn't really matter, but yeah. For some highly toxic pollutants, then any emission can cause large damage. So that's why we say that maybe one small level of emission is enough to create a large damage. Here are some functions that we can look at in the. So this, I think, in the book they have these sort of curves. which could show you the sort of damage that you could observe as function of emission. So this is marginal damage function. And you see here exponential. So in a sense, the damage is already increasing, but if the marginal damage is increasing exponentially, then the damage itself it increases even more than exponentially, you can imagine. Well, actually, the derivative of an exponential is an exponential. So yeah, so they're all increasing exponentially. So that's one in which so in this case, that would be the case in which, yeah, losing the first unit, yeah, the first unit of emission is bad, and then the subsequent unit are almost as bad as the first, or yeah, they're slightly worse than the first one, but not terribly worse. Yeah, so that could be something like a chemical emission. So yeah, there's no level of chemical in the ground that we like, basically. So this is here on the x-axis, we have emissions, but you could also think of the x-axis as any other measure of how much pollution you have. So here would be for gas pollutions, like ambient concentrations. And here I have written heterogeneous population. Why is this? So you have something like if so asthmatic people suffer at low level, then everybody starts suffering at higher level. Yeah, so here, so we think of, yeah, a good example would be pollutions from ozone or small particles that form diesel engines. So these people are really affected by them. And then you may have a sort of plateau at which it's not too bad, but then if it's really, really horrible, like in some of the most polluted cities, like we think China, I don't know if the situation is improving in China, but like 10 years ago, it was very, very hard. Yeah, so especially because of coal burning. So then everybody gets sick and starts dying. And then here would be, again, a threshold case in which if you have a few amounts, it doesn't matter. And then if you have more, then it starts. And by the way, this is true for ambient emissions, but you could think of the same thing for, say, drinking water. So you may imagine, oh, the water I drink is perfectly safe. No, it's just the level of bacteria, microbes, viruses, and various chemicals is never zero. It's just low enough that it's tolerable for your body. But so if we were to ask Montreal city, please put zero, make sure that there is zero contaminant in my water, then what they would have to do essentially is they couldn't filter it anymore. They would just have to distill it. So, and you would get something like a perfectly pure water, but it would cost a ton of money to do it. And that wouldn't change all that much for you. So this is something that's set generally by norms. Recently, so yeah, let's say is norms dictate which threshold is safe. Water can be one. Pesticides can be one. For instance, recently, Bayers, they said, yeah, we would like, for the farmers to be able to, not clean so much their berries and their stuff, and put more of our Roundup ready stuff inside it. And so they really lobby the Canadian government to do it, and the Canadian government said no. But so it could, maybe they could have gotten it, and then what we would just assume is, oh, maybe the threshold is actually greater than we thought, or maybe we just accept that there are some pollutant in people. And by the way, another thing too is another thing to note is that this is important as to decide what to study or what to think about. So, for instance, going back to Monsanto and Bayer, so a lot of people are really concerned about their pesticide, their Roundup. But if you ask chemists that do this, that really their job is to know, oh, is it safe, is it not safe? My job is to make sure people don't die, and if people die, then it's on me because I didn't test properly. Sometimes they're going to say things like, yeah, the Monsanto thing, yeah, it's maybe bad, but not all that bad. But what's actually preoccupying from my perspective is how you spray it, for instance. So if you have to bind it with some soap or some mixture so that it sticks on the leaves, for instance, and people use it in their gardens, that may be very bad for people. So this very specific pesticide that you think about matters a lot, and yeah, it matters for what. So this is a big, I think, in my opinion, a big, an important public service that we do is just test things as much as we can, and many things we just cannot know what the safe level are. All right. Oh, by the way, my voice is fine at the back. Yeah. Okay. All right. So of course, the damage and the willingness to pay to reduce the damage depends on many things. So it depends on location. So typically, if you have some contaminant in a highly urbanized place where there's a high density of population, then everybody is on top of each other, and it can affect a lot of people. Whereas in rural areas, the same substance is there, but in terms of we human, we don't care all that much. Now, if you say, yeah, but I care about rabbits and deers, then okay, yeah, then that's different. But from a purely human perspective, people may say that it's so it matters how many people are going to expose to it. Knowledge. So if I don't look at it, it cannot harm me. So this is something that that we that it's a very good strategy if you don't want to have to pay for something, is you just stop studying it. So yeah, one example was so for instance, so Trump is going to turn up a lot in my, I don't know why, but yeah, he's just there a lot of the time. So we try to cancel. What was the, yeah, so NASA. So that's one of the first things he tried. So he said, yeah, okay, now I'm in charge, and first thing we're going to do is ask NASA to not care about monitoring pollution. We know it's there, who cares? Well, if you don't know it's there, you don't have to act on it. So taste and preferences. So this is going back to who is concerned. So if my child has asthma, I'm going to have a big preference in reducing the pollution, whereas maybe if I'm a tough person who doesn't care, then I don't care. And also ability to pay. So why do we say that? In a sense, something that whoever receives the damage is, it's it's bad for everybody. Yes, but at the end of the day, it matters in terms of willingness to pay. So, so this is the same way, the same reason why if I go to buy a car and I'm poor, I'm going to go to look at cheap cars, and if I'm rich, I'm going to use that look at expensive car. So so I may be very happy with an expensive car, but if I can't buy it, then who cares? So it's the same thing with respect to pollution. People have different priorities, and if it's say a very poor society, then they may say, oh yeah, well, I would like to have my species survive and all of it, but I want to eat tonight, so I don't care, and I'm going to cut the forest and cultivate it. So that matters. All right. So just simply the marginal damage function reflects, so it's the height of the, yeah, so I write here. Oh yeah, so it's that's a bit repeating what I said. So the height of the total damage function changes as function of the marginal damage function. Yeah, so this is so the marginal damage curve shows the society's willingness to pay to reduce emissions and so improve environmental quality. So again, this is to say if we could check into everybody's mind, then we would be able to know what was their willingness to pay. But I'm not saying that it's possible to ask them and get a truthful answer out of them every time. So it's analogous to a demand curve for ordinary goods in the sense that so if you normally if you emit more, then people are want to pay more to reduce it. But if you reduce and reduce and reduce emissions, then people at some point have enough reduction. So their marginal willingness to pay for an extra reduction is not all that high. Yeah, so the marginal curve is upward sloping because the good measure is, yeah, again, undesirable, so it's positive, and the well-being increases the less we have of it. So the more emissions, the more we're willing to pay to reduce it, the less emission at some point we're good. Yeah, so the total damage for a given emission is the area under the marginal damage curve. So now I'm going to show you, yeah, so let me show you, yeah, they say that a drawing is worth 1,000 words, so an image is worth 1,000 words, so here it is. So here are the damages from emission. So here in all this class, I think what may be confusing for you is that we sort of flip the axes around by which I'm following what the book does. Maybe I should just flip everything around, but here we're going to do it as the book does it. So rather than consider reduction in emissions, which would be a good that you would buy, what we are going to consider is emissions, which is a good that harms you, so you want less of it. So it's like something that you would like to buy, but look at but you see that the slope is positive. So if here I consider the damage reduction, then it would look more like a normal damage curve, the normal damage curve. But still the same principle applies. So this is the total, the marginal damage from emission. So here I've just drawn a positive curve. This S there, I think, is just something I forgot to remove. Yeah. Let me just use my magic and remove it. Here it is. It's gone, so nobody can see it. And the total damage is, of course, the integral from 0 to the damage that I'm considering, here 10, for instance. And how do I compute it? Well, it's quite easy. So if it's a triangle, so it's total damage equal to 10 minus 0 times divided by 2. Just going back, so this is again, you don't have to know calculus, but this is in case you didn't have a linear function, this is how you would write it. So it's the integral from 0 to e of the marginal damage at every level. So the total damage is the integral of the marginal damage up to a certain point. And yeah, the common assumption is that it's an increasing function. So something you could have is e over 2, like I showed you here. So for instance, more CO2 means greater damage from additional CO2. So why would that be? Well, if we think of many effects, like say the albedo effect. So yeah, example of this. More CO2. So ice melts. More heating. So it means that if there is already a lot of emission in the air, then the extra emission, which creates even more ice melt, is even worse than before. Okay, so this is total damage and marginal damage. I think it's not too complicated. Right. Okay, so costs now. Abatement costs. So we just said that pollution is bad for many people, and it's bad for people who need to reduce it too, because they, of course, would like not to. So it's the cost of reducing the quantity of residuals emitted into the environment. Yeah, so why does it cost? Well, it costs because you have to change production technology or change inputs, recycle your residuals, treat them, or yeah, or even reduce output. That's the first point. I thought I forgot to. So yeah, the first way of doing it, of reducing pollution, is just not do anything, so you're not going to pollute. Yeah, so big important point that we're going to discuss. Economic efficiency requires that we start abating the cheapest source of pollution first, and we finish with the most expensive. Why? Well, simply because we want to have the more bang for our buck. So if I'm a government and they give me some money, and I have the choice between, say, reducing CO2 from cement or subsidizing something that's fancy and people like, but that does absolutely nothing, then it's I'm sorry, but you should do what's cheapest first because you're going to get much more effect out of that. But governments are often not too not too clever. I'm going to say that not I don't want to get into trouble. Maybe I can get a job there at some point in my life. So I'm not cutting my bridges, but yeah, they should learn one thing or two from economic efficiency. And yeah, we have the same similar concepts. So this was MD, MTD. So MD is here, total damage is this. So we are going to have something very similar, which will be total abatement cost, which is how much you had to pay in total to abate a certain amount of pollution. And the marginal abatement cost, which is at some level of pollution abatement. How much do we have to pay to reduce an extra unit of pollution? To achieve one extra unit of decrease of emission levels. Exactly. Here is an example of marginal abatement cost curves. So can somebody explain to me why it starts in the negative and why here it's positive? Because usually when you have to pay for something, when something is a cost, then the cost is positive. Yeah, so these things are, so that's just the no-brainer. So that's thing that you should really just do because it's just going to not cost you to cost you less money in your life. So there are things that would actually cost a negative amount of money if we did them. So I'm not saying this is the case. So this is a illustration. Exact figures. But still is the case. So it makes the point. Should you start by subsidizing hybrid cars or even electric cars? I could have. Let's just have fun and add electric cars there, which would be even more costly. Well, no, you should start by just having a program that encourages people to use LEDs and to make gas cars more efficient. So because we have the technology and gas cars are usually not too expensive to make. It's true that you're going to achieve some reduction in pollution if you use something like hybrid cars or electric cars, but they are so for the cost that they cost. So why do people still buy electric cars? Because they are cool and they want to feel like they're a good person, but it's not the cheapest way to achieve reduction. Yeah, so many different things. So building retrofits. So I don't know here, but in France there was a big program when I lived there that they said, oh, if you want to insulate your house, we have a government program. It's going to cost you €1. It's just symbolic. It's just you should do it anyways. So for the French government to not have to produce this extra electricity for people in their home is enough. So they would just say it costs you nothing. We do it for free for you, and it of course reduces your electricity bills. Yeah, reforestation. I'm not sure about this because yeah, the impact is not all that clear. So, but so that's the gist of it. So yeah, so not entirely sure. And of course, so evaluating either the damage or the marginal abatement cost is difficult because many things come into the process. But the nice thing is costs, at least at some point, if people actually do it, they can just have the receipt and say that's how much it cost me to do it. So this is an illustration of what's going on, but here, look that we have abatement on this axis. And here what we had is emissions. So to have both thing on the same axis, what we're going to have is emission on the same axis. So we're going to flip this curve like this rather than like this. Okay, so but still I wanted to show you to get this idea of how things look like. But yeah, we're going to flip. So on the horizontal axis, we're going to represent emissions. So it's a negative of abatement. So the marginal abatement cost curve will slope upward to the left, or rather will slope. More to the right. And one thing too is, just for the sake of analysis, we're going to assume that the abatement costs are always positive. So as we said, maybe in some cases they're actually negative, but for the sake of analysis, we're going to have them always be positive. Well, computer is, um, all right, so it might look like this. So this is with the emissions on the horizontal axis. So this exponential, well, it costs little to start abating, and then it costs more and more and more as you reach a very high level. And if you want something entirely pure, then it may cost you infinite because it's impossible. Yeah, or something more linear. So this is what we're going to have most of the time. So the costs rise uniformly as emissions are reduced. So again, this is marginal abatement cost curve. So it's the cost of reducing an extra unit. So the smaller the amount of emissions, then the more it costs you to reduce an extra unit. And this, so what this is, yeah, you could say or imagine processing. So then the first, at first it's very expensive because you just need to build it, and then so it gets going, and it costs more and less, and then it starts to cost more and more and more as you're trying again to reach a zero level that might be impossible to reach. So here is so that's the opposite of what we've just seen. So in that case, that would be a marginal abatement cost curve. So here I gave you a small formula. It's 60 minus 4e. And the total abatement cost is the area under the total abatement cost curve, the marginal abatement cost curve, from total emission to to the level that we care about. So here it would be 10. So note, something important to note. If a firm can emit as much it will such an let me just say this is 0. So simply put, I'm not going to emit an extra amount just for the sake of it. I'm just going to not want to pay anything. So here I'm going to emit 15. So how do we find it? So to find it, we say simply 60 minus 4 equals 0. So we get that right. So this is I tell you, you're going to compute this kind of things. This kind of thing. Now the fun begins. Yeah, half an hour. All right, let's go. So things become a bit more complicated when you have many different types of marginal abatement costs. And this is going to illustrate why we say that they are increasing like this. It's because we start by abating the cheapest source of emissions possible. So here, imagine you have two different plants. So one has a marginal abatement cost of 60 minus 4e, and the second has a lower abatement cost, so 30 minus 2e. So if there are no abatements, so first thing you have to ask yourself is, so what would each firm emit if they can emit whatever they want? So the first emits such that 60 minus 4e equals 0. And we get, yeah, E equals 60 over 415. That's what we just computed. And the second one would emit such that 30 minus 2 equals 0. So E equals 30 over 215. So we see that both of them emit the same amount initially. But obviously, it's quite easy to see if we graph these two things that this technology there, this firm is, we would say, is newer technology. Lower. So I'm not saying it the firm pollutes less, because if they can, they're going to pollute as much, both of them. But for one, it's cheaper to stop emitting than for the other. And now we're going to see how much it costs if we are not smart about what we do. So imagine that yeah, legislation mandates 9 tons per year of emission. So if I mandate 9 tons, and so these are tons, and both firms emit 15 tons if they can emit whatever they want, then it means, in other words, that they have to reduce 15 minus 9, so 6 tons per year each. And then we reach this level of emissions abated of 2 firms times 15 minus 9 equals 12. So by the way, not necessarily smart. So here we graph them. So this is the firm 1 and firm 2. So you see that if they can, they both emit 15. But the equation of firm 2 clearly shows that at every level, the marginal abatement cost is lower for firm 2 than for firm 1. But we just say, yeah, we don't care too much about this. We're going to have a one-size-fits-all policy of abating 6. Everybody has to reduce by 6, however costly it is. So what is going to be the total abatement cost? Well, for firm 1, it's going to be the area under firm 1's marginal abatement cost. So that's regions A plus B. So sometimes I'm going to just put letters there. So it's not that this is something that's inside the equations. There is just to designate some region there. So here's the area, this triangle there, and B is this triangle here. So yeah, the total abatement cost of A is going to be A plus B. And for firm 2 is going to be just B, of course, because firm 2 is less expensive to stop emitting. All right, so do I compute them? Yeah. So the total abatement cost for firm A is 15 minus 9 times 24 divided by 272. And the total abatement cost of firm 2 is to abate 9 is 15 minus 9 times 12 divided by 2. So that's 36. That this is 36. This is, and the whole thing is 72. So the total abatement cost is TAC. It's the sum of how much it costs for the first firm, how much it costs for the second firm. So 72 plus 36, that's 108. So that's a mandate. So mandate, yeah, I should say. Mandate is just a directive. So you just mandate that this is, so this is what we're going to say that to mean by mandate. And then, so what would be the efficient way of doing it? Do you have an idea of what I should do? I've been talking for a while, so. If we look at this, is there a better strategy to achieve the same level of reduction? But to make it cost less? No, no idea. Imagine the following. So I tell to firm 1, well, it's expensive for you to abate emissions, so maybe you don't have to abate 9. You can just abate 8. So then, what's the cost saving of this? It's so yeah. I mean that abates 6, abate 5. So then from 1 can pollute up to 10, for instance. So 10 would be maybe here. So that's the saving from 1 to not emit to emit the last unit. is this region there plus this region there. But then the counterpart of this is somebody else has to make up this extra emission that was allowed for firm 1. Who it is? Well, it's firm 2. So firm 2 will, I'm going to just tell firm 2, please emit more. Please reduce more because it's cheap for you to emit, to reduce more. So firm 2 will have to reduce. Here, this is mandate. Let's write this super small. So firm 1. And firm uh, 8. So the total emission is still the same. So it's before it was 9 plus 9, 18. Now it's 10 plus 8. But how much did it cost? Well, it costs this much more because firm 2 had to reduce its emissions. But it costs this much less because firm 1 didn't have to pay this much. So was it a good idea to do that? Well, if you don't compensate firm 2, then yeah, firm 2 would not accept that. They would say it's unfair. Why should I reduce more? But if you just say, okay, we're just going to take money from firm 1 and give it to firm 2 to compensate it, then it's a pretty good deal, in my opinion. No? Yeah? Go ahead. So can you be a bit more precise? Yeah, so cost, but can you qualify exactly what we mean by cost? The total cost or marginal cost? That's my question. Almost. So it's marginal cost, but your intuition is almost perfect. So yeah, so if I continue doing this, so I'm going to here reduce a bit more. So and here reduce a bit less until I get to this situation there. So here, yeah, here from 1 would emit, I don't know. So that's 12 maybe, and from 2 emits 6. I don't know what the numbers are. And here, what happens is if you still continue, then the marginal cost of from 2 to reducing emissions starts to be higher than the marginal gain you get from 1, because from 1 emits so little that from 1's marginal cost is so yeah, it's so the smart policy is to have equal marginal yeah. So I don't want to leave this there because it's going to anyways, I'm showing you what we have to do to make sure that we reach a nice outcome. All right. So here total abatement cost is 108. Equimarginal principle. So to minimize the total abatement cost, abatement efforts should be distributed between sources such that their marginal abatement cost of net production of reduction or abatement. Their total, yeah, no, this I should just get rid of this entirely. So their marginal abatement cost of production. Okay, I get what I mean. Yeah, no, it's just superfluous. Fewer words is fine when the sentence is clear as it is. All right, so if we want to have the same reduction as before, so 12 tons per year, we want to, but we're going to shift the burden for different on different firms. So, but we have that we are going to have the same marginal abatement cost for each firm. So here is our sort of constraint. So the same total. So this is constraint of on what we want to achieve. So it's a optimization problem, but don't worry, no calculus involved because it's already solved for you. The solution is that the marginal abatement cost should be the same. But still, so this is what we care. We care that 15 minus the emission of firm 1 plus 15 minus the emission of firm 2 equals 12. That's the total reduction. So this is reduction of firm 1, the reduction of firm 2. But we can freely choose E1 and E2, right? And then the second condition is that it's the efficiency condition. So that's the condition in some ways, that the marginal cost, abatement cost of firm 1 be equal to the marginal abatement cost of firm 2. So here 60 minus 4 E1 equals 30 minus 2 E2. So it even make you work a bit for it. So, but yeah, okay, it's quite clear that what we have to do is here we have one equation, two unknowns. Here we have a second equation and two unknowns. So we have two equations, two unknowns. This is a simple linear system, so we can just use one and substitute in the other or vice versa. So I don't know how I did it. All right, so I 2 equals 18 minus 1. So I think I'll do it. So I think it's here, right? So this is 30 equals 12. So 30 minus 12. Yeah. So that's what do I want to achieve? 80 minus 1. Oh, yes, so I want to keep it on there. So that's so this is how I got the first equation. And then I can just substitute it in the second equation. So here I had E2. So I'm just going to say that E2 is this, 18 minus E1. And so when I solve it, I find that E1 has to be equal to 11. And E2 has to be equal to 18 minus 11, which is 7. So I wasn't too far. All right, so in that case, we get that the marginal abatement of firm 1 is at 11 is equal to the marginal abatement cost of the firm2 at 7, which is 6. So of course it has to be the same since I started with this restriction. And in that case, I can compute again the total abatement cost, and I get that the total abatement cost of firm1 is 32, and firm2 of abating, and then this is a function of emission, so 7. And you see that firm2 pays much, much, much more. So it looks very unfair to firm2, and it's true that it's not. So it looks very unfair to firm2, except that if we put in place some incentives to make sure that firm2 will want to reduce to 7, then it's firm2 is going to accept to willingly to pay this much, because we're going to have some other policies in place that we are going to see later. And then if you add up the two costs, it gives 96, which is below 108. We are in this situation there. So the two have a marginal abatement cost of 16. Firm2 abates to 7, firm1 abates to 11. And you see that, yeah, firm2 pays a lot. So that's 32. This goes 60. Oh, I can, they say I can, true that I can just, there was some message that told me that I could control my, anyways. Oh, yes. Okay, that's good. All right, so, yeah, 64. So you see that firm2 paid much, much more than firm1, but it was all in all more efficient this way. And this is why what we want to do is to aggregate the marginal abatement costs by adding them all together, but to know that, to make sure that at each possible total level of emissions, what I do is I I assign to the cheapest way of the cheapest the cheapest source of reduction that I can. So this is a consequence of the equimarginal principle. So by the way, is there a question about this, or sometimes I go too quickly and yeah. All right, so okay, so this so we have to aggregate marginal abatement costs, and this is where the aggregating demand curves or supply curves is going to come in handy, because the same it's going to be the same way is going to apply. So we aggregate marginal abatement costs horizontally. We never add prices, we add quantities. Why? Because what we want to see is, if my total quantity emitted is, say, 1,000 tons, so what is the marginal cost to reduce this additional ton? An additional ton? Well, it's I assign it, I spread it around to the people who have the cheapest cost possible. Yeah, so the marginal abatement cost represents the minimum marginal abatement cost achievable. So that's what I said. So under the equimarginal principle, abatement to abate the cheapest unit of pollution, no matter which factory emits it. Yeah, this may be a bit tricky to start. I'm just going to explain it graphically, and then yeah, 5 minutes, it's enough. So this is how we do it. Well, let me start this way. So here I have my two firms, and I asked, so before I just said, oh, there's a mandate that says that we have to reduce 12 in total. But I don't know for a fact that I had to reduce 12 in total because I don't know what the damage is from these emissions. So what I want to do is to choose the optimal level of reduction given the damages that are caused and given how much it costs me to abate the emissions. So this is what I'm going to do. So so imagine that in this world, there are only two firms that pollute, firm one and firm two. And what would be the total level of emissions if I didn't ask the firms anything? Well, firm one would emit 15, firm two would emit 15. So in all, they would emit 60 tons. And then what is the cost of going from 60 to, to this level there, 15 over 2, or rather to, so what quantity of, okay, yeah, a better way to ask is this. So at what level of total emissions would I reach a marginal abatement cost of 30? Well, if firm one emits all, firm two emits all, reduces emissions to 0, then the marginal abatement cost at the end is 30, right? So this firm two would have to reduce all its emissions, and firm two would have to limit to firm one. So that would be so this looks like it's 15 divided by 2, right? Yeah, if I could compute this simply. So it's MEC1 of E equals 60, 60 minus 4E equals to 30. So it's 30 divided by that work. Okay, I'm out of time. So let's, yeah, I thought it was an ambitious thing to start doing this with 10 minutes, but all right, so let's stop here and we can continue next time.